former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, you're a long-term student of history and also of military, an expert in military history. What the president's press conference today and then what Donald Trump said, do we have a commander-in-chief currently that is serious about engaging the enemy and winning this war?
Well, we have a commander-in-chief in Barack Obama who explicitly lied to the American people about Benghazi and who is now explicitly lying to the American people about Orlando. I'm going to write my newsletter, which people can get at GingrichProductions.com for free, and I'm going to lay out the words matter and that the president's language is totally, utterly dishonest and misleading. This is an act of war. This is an act committed by a dedicated Islamic supremacist. In the world of Islamic supremacists, killing gays is totally legitimate. And this is part of what the gay community has to come to grips with. These people are their mortal enemies, literally mortal, will kill them. And this person was acting within the framework of a Sharia position that we have still refused to come to grips with. And the fact that the FBI was following this guy in 2013 and following him in 2014 tells you that the guidelines for them are much too strict and much too biased. I don't know whether it is psychological. I don't know whether it is intellectual. I don't know what ideological, but Barack Obama cannot accept the reality that Islamic supremacists want to destroy Western civilization and in the process want to kill as many Americans as they can. He just can't come to grips with it. It's a bizarre period. I mean, not since Buchanan refused to accept that the Civil War was coming and allowed the situation to decay for over a year. Not since then have we had a president so totally out of touch with reality.
Mr. Speaker, with Garland, Texas, and Chattanooga, and Fort Hood, and now Orlando, and one after the nightclub in Seattle, one after the other, he's not a
Boston. How about the Boston?
Boston bombing. He's not a. By the way, which the guy today pledged himself to. He's not a stupid person. He went to Columbia and Harvard Law School. He's not a dumb man. What is it that we have this Kafkaesque day like today, where he won't even get up and address it? We are in a dire circumstance in this country. What is it about this guy that he will?
But here's what I'd like to have the White House press corps say. I would love for them to go in tomorrow morning and say, let me get this straight. Because I was at Fox doing Fox and Friends this morning, and I noticed about 8:30 the briefing with the FBI, and the FBI already at 8:30 were saying, we have reason to believe. Now, they didn't use the word Islamic supremacy or Islamic radicalism because they're not allowed to. They'd lose their job in the Obama administration. But they said, we have reason to believe that this person was, in fact, affected by a radical ideology. Now, at that point, they did not tell us that they've been following him in 2013 and 2014. But they clearly, several people commented, you never see the FBI say this early. I mean, they must know something they haven't. And then, of course, you discovered, yeah, they've been following this guy for 2 solid years. Second, we got the report that he called into 9/11 and said, I'm doing this in the name of ISIS, and I pledge allegiance to ISIS. Third, we have reports he said, Allahu Akbar, as he began killing people. Now, my point is, I believe that this is what I'd like to have somebody do a timeline on. I believe every one of those facts was known before the president spoke. And for the president of the United States, with those facts on the table, to not tell the world the truth is such a fundamental disservice to his oath of office that it is almost unimaginable. I mean, I cannot imagine a president who is this profoundly dishonest, except that we frankly saw in Benghazi exactly the same kind of deliberate dishonesty carried out by every senior member of the administration.
But Donald Trump called for him because of the fact pattern you just laid out, called for him to resign in disgrace. That clearly won't happen. But do you believe that the House and the Senate should start to move to censure the president somehow for lack of action and actually hold hearings about what the FBI and Department of Homeland Security have been doing?
Well, I think what the House and Senate should do is two parallel things. They should first ask the FBI what laws have to be changed so we can move from monitoring to stopping. It doesn't make me feel comfortable to be told, oh, we were monitoring him for 2 years. Well, why didn't you stop him? Well, because our current laws, you have to go back to 1938-39 when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was confronting Nazi penetration in the United States. And the original House Un-American Activities Committee was not about communism, it was about Nazism. And we passed a series of laws that made it illegal to belong to the Nazi Party, illegal to pass out Nazi propaganda. I mean, there are moments when you set aside freedom of speech and you say, not in wartime. And we are at war. The first thing you have to understand is Orlando, like Fort Hood, like Boston, like California, these are acts of war. These are, and when I have somebody say, such senseless killing, I just want that person to go away and never again appear in public because it's not senseless. This is our mortal enemy killing as many of us as he can. From his perspective, it's a great victory. And the fact that our leadership can't confront that makes it harder for us to survive as a country.
Mr. Speaker, before I let you go, two questions. Number one, Paul Ryan, when Donald Trump brought up the temporary cessation of either resettlement program with Muslims or immigration until we can kind of get sorted out, because as Jeff Sessions said in the previous segment, even the government admits there's no chain of title on these papers. There's no real vetting process we can do right now coming out of many countries in the Middle East. That Paul Ryan said that's not American values. That's not our American values. The pious right was at the Party at Davos conclave up in Park City with Mitt Romney this weekend, essentially mocking and ridiculing the Ben Carson, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump voters, the 84% of the working class and middle class, hardworking Americans that voted anti-establishment. Do you believe that the Republican leadership as it exists today has the fortitude, the grit, and the determination to actually win this war?
Well, I think we're going to find out over the next couple of years. I mean, I'm very disturbed. The more I've looked at Clinton cash, and the more I've realized, for example, how much money was involved in bribing the Clintons in order to get uranium given to the Russians. And the Congress has had no hearings, no official investigation, no questions. We had a report by ABC News on Friday of a guy who gave big money and was appointed to a nuclear weapons advisory group when he had zero credentials. The Congress ought to be holding hearings. I mean, I'll start by saying I think the Republicans have been unilaterally disarmed by their timidity in simply seeking the truth. They don't have to be condemning anybody, but let's get to the truth. So let's go back to Orlando for a second. Congress should hold hearings by next week at the latest and ask the FBI to come in and say, what laws do you need changed so that in the future, when we discover, for example, if somebody pledges loyalty to ISIS, they ought to either be kicked out of the United States, stripped of their citizenship because they're now traitors, or they should go to jail. But we shouldn't tolerate people who pledge loyalty to ISIS, and yet we know today that the FBI can give you a whole list of people that they are monitoring who have pledged loyalty to ISIS, and the answer is, well, that's freedom of speech. No, it's not. You do not have freedom of speech in wartime, and if that means the Congress needs to pass a declaration of war against Islamic supremacism, then they ought to, and I called for this, by the way, on 9/11 and 9/12. I said immediately, 9/11 was an act of war, and we should declare war. And I got pushed back very hard by the Bush administration, and they were wrong. I mean, we need to understand we are at war. And anything less than an understanding that we are at war weakens us in the face of an enemy who wants to destroy us.
Mr. Speaker, before we let you go, last question. You're a student of history, and you know from antiquity forward. Is there any society you remember that has its cultural, its media, its financial, its political elite that appears like our elite, unwilling to defend our values and unwilling to take our enemies on? Has any nation like that ever survived?
Sure. There's a classic case study. It's a brilliant book called Troublesome Young Men, which is a study of the younger, not of Churchill, but of the younger World War I veteran Tory politicians who tried to take on Chamberlain. Baldwin and Chamberlain, as the head of Great Britain, methodically, systematically, and deliberately lied to the American people. They were reinforced by the London Times and most of the major newspapers. They described Churchill as though he were crazy. and only the objective, tragic reality of Hitler turned it around. But they were so desperately afraid of another war like World War I that they were totally prepared to lie to the British people. And it's a great case study in disarmament.
What do you think has to happen in our country to turn this around? What would you recommend the audience focus on?
It's not complicated. The Congress has to hold hearings. The Congress has to start passing laws. They have to put Obama and Clinton in a box, and they either have to cave and sign the laws, or they have to be on the side of keeping America defenseless. And then you have to win a general election this fall. I mean, take a state like Wisconsin. Feingold, who's a very attractive personality, has to be put to the test by Ron Johnson on a very simple premise. Are you prepared to defend America? Are you prepared? Somebody wrote me a note today and said, "Make America safe again" should be the ¡2 slogan. I thought it was a brilliant framework.
Brilliant.
And let's face it. The list you and I made up just now, is a tiny portion of the total problem, and we're not safe. And if they get nuclear weapons or biological weapons or chemical weapons, we are faced with a nightmare. And so I think it's better for us right now to design a grand strategy, destroy them before they destroy us, and understand that this is fully as much a war as World War II was. The way you do that is you have a great national debate, and you win the election, and you defeat the people who are nuts. And anybody who wants to see what I'm talking about, go back and look at a speech I gave in April of 2003 at the American Enterprise Institute on fundamentally, profoundly overhauling the State Department. The State Department is an institution of demilitarization, demobilization, and a collapse of American defense. I mean, it's unbelievable how much damage the State Department does to us every week.
Mr. Speaker, how can people get access to this newsletter? Can you give the website again?
And they just go to gingrichproductions.com.
We'll have a link on the homepage.
And we'd love to share with them. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna have a link on Breitbart. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Really appreciate it.